My husband let me apologize and kicked me out of the house without remorse. My life with my husband was wonderful and fulfilling, and we both loved every moment of it. At that point, we had been married for 5 years, and we were tremendously fulfilled by our relationship with one another. Through the highs and lows of life, we supported one another, laughed together, and shared our hopes and goals. On the other hand, about the time that I discovered I was pregnant, I started emotionally withdrawing from my husband. This continued until I gave birth. As the news of the pregnancy began to register in my brain, I experienced a roller coaster of contrasting feelings all at once. I was thrilled to bring a new life into this world, but at the same time, I was filled with apprehension and doubt about what the future held for us. My mind was constantly racing with questions about the ways in which our lives might shift, as well as whether or not we were genuinely prepared to become parents. In the midst of my inner conflict, I have unknowingly begun to spend more time by myself, allowed me to work through my feelings and come to terms with the upcoming shifts in our lives, which brought me some measure of comfort. I distanced myself from him and withdrew into myself, which led to the formation of a chasm between us that appeared to widen with each passing day. In the initial stages of our interaction, he responded by reacting and making an effort to get me to reveal what was hurting me in order to get his point across. He felt the distance that was growing between us and was motivated to figure out what was going on and find a solution. He bombarded me with questions in an effort to get to the bottom of the enigma surrounding the shift in my conduct. In spite of his real care and constant efforts, I discovered that I was growing more defensive and angry as time went on. Each question felt like an intrusion into the chaos that was going on inside of me, and rather than opening up, I lashed out. My rage and fury were misdirected. They were aimed at him, who was only trying to be of assistance. My husband started to see that his attempts to connect with me were only making the situation worse as I became increasingly hostile toward him. He noticed the pain in my eyes and realized that his presence, despite his best efforts, seemed to make the situation worse. He was sorry for what he had done. He was so adamant about avoiding making the situation any more difficult that he stopped moving forward and rethought his strategy. He immersed himself in his job both to distract himself and to put some emotional distance between himself and the situation. The long hours he spent working at the office turned into an escape for him, a place where he could momentarily put the mounting tension between us out of his mind. He moved his focus, and he immersed himself in chores and projects with the hope that the time away would bring clarity and an opportunity for me to come to him when I was ready. When he started getting occupied with his work all the time, I felt relieved. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I eventually convinced myself that there was nothing wrong. I had the impression that his never-ending worry was nothing more than a manifestation of his unwavering commitment to providing for our rapidly expanding family. Never in a million years did I imagine that the minute I gave birth to our precious daughter, our seemingly perfect lives would be turned upside down. When our daughter was born, I was overjoyed and my heart was filled with love. I was awestruck by the miracle of life and pleased to take on the responsibilities of becoming a mother. On the other hand, as the days went by, I was unable to escape the sensation of misery that had started to creep into my very being. I yearned for my husband's company, his care, and his touch. In short, everything that had contributed to the uniqueness of our connection in the past. The void that existed in our home was a reflection of the void that existed in my own heart. I wanted his love, support, and attention. I yearned for the intimacy that we had once enjoyed and the profound recollections of the times that had brought us closer. The lack of his affection became intolerable, and I knew that I had to make an effort to connect with him. I gathered up all the bravery I could muster, and I went up to him in the hopes that I would once more discover comfort in his arms. On the other hand, as I vented my emotions and exposed my fragility, he responded with a surprising lack of warmth. He requested some distance from me in order to process everything. His comments pierced me right through to the core like a spear. When all I wanted was his presence and love, I was caught away by the fact that I did not anticipate such a decisive rejection. Confusion and hurt swirled together inside of me, and I found myself wondering where our once vibrant relationship had gone wrong. Then I recalled that it was entirely my responsibility. I had pushed him away from me for the entire period of 9 months. However, I came to the realization that it was now my turn to wait for him, just as he had waited for my attention and affection for the previous 9 months. I did not want to comply, but I did as he asked and gave him the distance he desired. Yet each passing day seemed like an eternity. The idea that I was navigating this new stage of parenting by myself only strengthened as I cared for our kid. I had the distinct impression that I was doing it all by myself. I yearned for the times when we used to be able to get together and share reassuring hugs, hilarious moments, and late-night conversations. When I was going through the most painful period of isolation of my life, the world appeared to be an empty and hopeless place. Every day seemed like I was fighting an uphill struggle against the void that existed within me. During this bleak time, a college friend of mine came to visit me in my city, which served as an unanticipated glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. I finally gave in to his urging and agreed to go out with him in the vain hope that a change of environment might provide some temporary relief from the agony that had been building up in my chest. As we made our way through the bustling streets, we had the distinct impression that time had stopped, and it had been a very long time since I'd felt so alive. During those hours that we spent together, the absence of my husband was pushed to the background of my consciousness. I decided to give in to the pleasure of the moment, savoring the connection I had with my friend and granting myself permission I had with my friend and granting myself permissions other than desolation. I didn't give any thought to the challenges I was facing or the hole that had been created in our relationship, but as the day drew to a close and as my friend drove me back to my house, the harshness of reality re-emerged in its full force. Once more, the emptiness invaded my senses, and it brought to my mind the painful nothingness that exists within my heart. The momentary relief I had received only served to heighten my anticipation of the torment that awaited me behind closed doors. I found that spending more time with my friend helped me feel better, so I continued doing that. He made it possible for me to temporarily get away from the isolation that had been plaguing me for such a long time. My feelings for my friend began to change slowly but surely over time. I was in a lot of pain, and I was wishing for intimacy, yet being in his presence helped me feel better. A glimmer of hope was rekindled within me as a result of his unflinching support and the joy he brought into my life. It was a risky route to take, one that blurred the limits of friendship and stirred up feelings that should not have been stirred up. Torn between the need for happiness and the weight of my commitment, I told my friend about my feelings for him. And he also admitted that he had feelings for me, and we started seeing each other, and in what seemed like the blink of an eye, we started sleeping together. I foolishly believed that my husband was unaware of the affair I was having with my friend, but little did I know that he had been aware of everything the entire time. When he suddenly started talking to me, spending more time with me, and displaying an increased interest in our relationship, it came as a complete surprise. As the feeling of guilt began to devour me from the inside out, I became aware that I needed to own up to my transgression and admit the truth. First, I had a very difficult conversation with my friend Lover about how we need to stop doing all that because it is getting difficult to deceive my husband every other day, and now my husband has started giving me time, and also he has started cracking jokes, so I think he got back in my life, and I could not be happier to reconcile with my husband than being unfaithful to him all life. He did not believe what I had just told him, so at first he believed I was joking. However, when he saw I was serious, he began to curse me and told me that I could never be happy in my life because I am an insatiable bitch who only thinks for herself, and then he walked away. One evening, while we sat in the living room with the lights turned down low, the burden of keeping my secrets became intolerable. I finally worked up the nerve to tell my husband everything that had been going on behind his back, and I did so with a shaky voice. As I exposed the breadth and depth of my feelings and acknowledged the errors I had made, tears began to stream down my face. To my utter surprise, rather than showing frustration or fury in response, My spouse maintained his composure throughout the entire situation. The only sound that broke the stillness was the sound of my own labored breathing as the silence continued to hang heavily in the air. And then, with a somber face, he dropped his own bombshell, which was that he had been aware of my affair the entire time it had been going on. As I fought to make sense of this information, the beating of my heart increased in my chest. How was he able to know? Why hadn't he mentioned something earlier in the conversation? My thoughts were filled with questions, and I felt a wave of confusion coming over me. However, as I gazed into the eyes of my husband, I saw a mixture of melancholy and rage. I had a feeling that something awful was about to be exposed, and then he hit me and said he was waiting for this time. He was waiting for me to appear guilty, and I felt embarrassed of myself, and then he evicted me from his house, within seconds of the strike. Update. I was walking on the road in the dark because I had no notion what my life would be like tonight, and similarly, I have no idea what my life will be like from this point forward. I do not know whether or not I will be granted custody of my newborn girl because, in comparison to my husband, I do not have the same level of financial stability. One thing I am sure that I have ruined my life and no one is blamed for it.